This is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I'm the fellow who has a hyphen in my name. The hyphen is silent, but I am anything but that. Today we're going to be talking about transparency. This is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley, the voice of Respectonomics, with my co-host Sarah Benton. Whatever part of the world you're in, hear it from snowy Canada. Good snowy morning.
Good morning.
Why didn't you say snowy?
I'm ignoring it.
Well, you can't. I had to trudge through it. But anyway, we're going to talk about transparency. And Sarah, you've had a lot of experience with this whole issue of transparency. And I'm going to be talking about it or sharing with you some thoughts on it. And I've got one sort of idea behind it. And that is, I want you to imagine a lovely, lovely summer's day or equivalent, and you're at some wonderful resort, and you suddenly realize you're thirsty. And one of those wonderful beach-serving people comes along and says, "Madam, would you like a drink?" And you say, "Yes." And subsequently, the drink is brought to you. Yes? How would you respond if the drink that was brought to you was in a black porcelain tumbler, and it had a lid on it, which was also black, so you could not actually see the contents of the drink, and it's got a straw sticking out of it, and then you find out that the straw has actually got holes in it, so that when you were to sort of suck on it, you would find that half the time you're just breathing in air and not getting the substance. I think that sums up a lot of the transparency issues today, whether it's corporate, whether it's social, whether it's in politics. It's always inside a black tumbler with a straw that's got holes in it. And I don't like it.
Okay.
I want my drink to be served in a nice crystal glass. I want the top to be open. I want it to be transparent. I want to see lumps of ice bubbling around in it. I want to see maybe a piece of lime that's in it. I want a straw that actually works. And you might even take away the straw and say, "Don't worry, you don't need it. You can drink straight out of the tumbler or the glass. Nice crystal one, Waterford, whatever you want." But we all know that feeling of transparency. And it's a beautiful feeling. Even if you don't say, "Hello, this is transparent," you actually love transparency. We love it in people. We love it in nature. We love it at every level, to be able to see through all the filters and all the camouflage and all that. We're looking for the truth. So transparency is extremely important. And when we don't have transparency, that is when the rot starts to grow. Because what in fact you're looking at is the alter ego, if you will, to transparency is secrecy. And when you have secrecy, when you have contortions, when you have people hiding behind their desks with great big bureaucratic answers to questions or thoughts that you've got, that they are unable to answer transparently and frankly, truthfully, the truth and transparency are very, very closely related. I would say they probably belong to the same DNA stem. So if we're looking at this issue of lack of transparency, we're seeing this now in many corridors of life. We're seeing it in politics, that sense that you're patted on the head with, "You don't really need to know." The corporation, when you come to your desk and you find out that 3 new initiatives have been introduced, nobody consulted you, nobody said to you, "What do you think?" And you were just told to get on with it. If you talk to, I believe you've had a situation where you've been engaged in an insurance claim. And I think what you have found is lack of transparency over and over again, that not so much that you're doubting the decision as much as you cannot get a question answered. I think that's a fair assessment. Yeah. So with that issue of transparency on the table, we need to understand that the beauty of transparency, nature is transparent. She'll be very clear with you. She'll say, "Here's the wind, here's the rain, here's the snow." She doesn't ever hide from you her true agenda. So if that is the case, then we need to say to one another, how do we get transparency back into the table? And the
Right.
first one, I think the first part of it is quite candidly, is nothing more or less, and Respectonomics is very emphatic on this. It's an awareness issue. Meaning, in other words, when we find that we're not being transparent, we need to rein ourselves up. When we find other people are not being transparent, we need to rein them in and use the word and say, you're not being transparent. You're not being clear. I don't understand. Here's a truth about not understanding. When you find that you're talking to an organization or a politician and you come away with that feeling that you don't understand, that is actually a proxy on a far more serious issue. The author of those discussions or comments doesn't understand himself or herself.
Mm.
So understand when you understand something, when you're in school and you understood a mathematical formula, and you really did, you could be crystal clear, transparent, crystal
Mm.
clear that the teacher did understand the nature of the problem or the nature of the solution.
Right.
They did understand it. So transparency is a very good way of allowing ourselves to admit that we do understand or we don't understand. There's nothing wrong with, in the sales world, one of the worst things we do is to pretend we know the answer. The far better answer is, actually, I do not know. I will have to get back to you.
Mm.
There's nothing wrong with that statement.
Right.
So I think first, the transparency deals with not only disclosing what we do know, but disclosing also what we do not know. Then I want to talk about something else. I was told many a moon ago that if you take on a project, you should always be sure that you can see it through. So, for example, if somebody says, I need help with my garden, and you say, fine, I'll come and help you with your garden, the principle behind that is, and I'll be back tomorrow to help doing some weeding or some planting or whatever it is, and the day after that, I'll be there to do some clipping. But you need to take the position that you are going to be able to see the project through.
Mm.
Isn't that interesting that if you want to see the project through, that you need transparency? You need to understand from the person who wants the help, what kind of garden are we talking about? How big is your flower bed? Are you going to be leaving it in the middle of the summer? Whatever questions there are. But transparency is a brilliant way for us to be able to understand that we take the project on or not. Nothing
Right.
wrong with not taking on a project, but we need that transparency. The other thing about transparency is it provides us with not an opportunity, it's not quite the right word, but it gives us that sense that we're going to be vulnerable. I'm going to have to admit to you, Sarah, that I don't actually know something, that
Mm.
I'm talking about something that I haven't done my homework on, whatever it is. My vulnerability, in fact, draws you closer to me. It doesn't reject you to me. What it does is it in fact narrows the distance between us, because vulnerability is a human experience. And when
Right.
other human beings understand that you've got the same experience, that is magnetic. It's got a sense of osmosis to it. You're drawn together. So transparency is so important because it does disclose vulnerability, and people love to see it. Not love to see it in the sense they're putting you down, but understanding themselves better in the context of your weakness, your vulnerability, or in my case, my vulnerability or weakness.
Right.
So the last thing I
It
want to
also
talk,
create a
sorry,
little bit of a safety net as well in terms of when you're showing vulnerability, sometimes it permits or allows or gives space for the other individual to feel comfortable showing their vulnerability.
I think that's a brilliant insight. And I think, Sarah, with that sense of the scope that you have to be able to sort of look around the edges and so on, that is such a good point, because how many times do we take on a project or we sell something or whatever it is? We don't have all the answers. And all you're doing is saying, hey, I'd like to have some scope on this. I may
Mm.
not have the complete picture. Fine.
Right.
I know one thing that doesn't have the complete picture: respectonomics. It never, never will have a complete answer. It's the story that has no ending. It's a story that's always growing, and I will admit that.
Right. Well, continuous development from
It
learning.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Transparency permits that. It doesn't stop it. Transparency, or its horrible enemy, which is secrecy, secrecy stops people in their tracks. It prevents growth. It encourages dissimulation. It does everything that's contrary to the general principle of let's get this growing together.
Right.
It's horrible. So the transparency we've talked about, and I want to sort of sign off on two things. One is we've talked about this in other discussions, but we need to understand. I'll give you a good example. I was at a Toyota dealership recently, and they have been taken over by a big corporation business or something. And what's interesting is he said to me that the actual dealer manager himself said, I don't understand our organization any longer. That is a terrible indictment.
Mm-hmm.
That means there's lack of transparency. You don't know who to talk to, when to talk to them. You don't know how to develop relationships. It just cuts at the core. How can a business be successful if you don't understand the whole strength of your organization?
Right.
It can't be done. So this transparency is a way of, in fact, integrating people. Companies love to talk about integrity.
Mm-hmm.
Politicians just thrive on it. They grab their lapels and say, I am a person of integrity. Well, if you are, then be a person of transparency.
Right.
Because that's where the integrity becomes clear, which is all we're talking about, the clarity. The last thing I want to do is this. In our world of doing things for other people, you may not know this, Sarah, so I will say it for me, okay?
Okay.
But I don't always get it right. I don't know if you know that or not.
I think if we all admit it to ourselves, we don't always get things right.
Well, that's really is the point. One of the worst things we can do today is those ghastly letters you get. We apologize for any inconvenience we may have caused. And you know, and I know that the apology is a minology. It means nothing.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it's almost insulting.
Right.
What is far more valuable and truthful and transparent is when you say to me, will you come and collect me from the airport? I forget to come and collect you from the airport. Oh, Sarah, I'm terribly sorry. No. Oh, Sarah, I failed to come and collect you, and I failed to write it in my diary. It is my failure.
Right.
And that in itself draws people together. It's just like what we were talking about earlier about transparency and, our fallibilities. When we actually show the vulnerability by admitting a failure, we in fact, there's nothing to be said about that. A failure is a failure is a failure. It's part of the fallibility of the human being. And that once we recognize that and admit to it, we then become icons of transparency.
Right.
I rest my case.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Sarah.